Welcome to the show. It's a Friday. Hope you're having a good day. Jesse and I were just talking before we got on the air that this has been an understandably long week. I think it's like the wind was taken out of our sails at the beginning of the week, and we've all been treading water trying to reach the shore ever since, is kind of what it feels like. Are you drained? Like, or do you feel as drained right now as you've felt maybe since think back to August, I guess?
I am very drained right now. Been a very long week in terms of, the sports world just taking their shots at Notre Dame. Obviously, still the disappointment of Notre Dame not making the playoff, and then also just a very busy work week as well. So worked a lot of hours. It just like in life sometimes it feels like everything just hits at once, and this is one of those weeks.
I'll tell you what hits at once. This show on the Irish Breakdown YouTube channel, and of course it's on the Sports Radio WSBT YouTube channel as well. But Ghost of ND in the YouTube chat says he only found IB a few weeks ago, and he says you guys have been getting spoiled with all the awesome Notre Dame content. I love back-to-back shows. So there's your standard, Jesse. You've got something to live up to now as we roll into this one. We're going to talk a lot about Notre Dame and the ACC, what could happen with that relationship in the future. I wanted to start, though, because we weren't here yesterday. Has this added to your state of mourning? Your guy, your Mr. Energy, Max Bulla, has packed up his bags and left South Bend, and he's back at his alma mater at Michigan State in East Lansing now as co-defensive coordinator there.
It was a slight pinch compared to some of the deep wounds that were felt in the prior days. Max Bulla is a really good coach. I think he's done a tremendous job with the linebackers. And like you said, I like him because of his energy, his enthusiasm. He's always on the field. He's always, going through drills with guys. You see him in, kind of in that. He wears like that body pad so guys can use him as shedding a blocker or an offensive lineman, that sort of stuff. So just the energy he brings is going to be missed. But like I texted you earlier in this week, the man has Spartans tattooed on his body. Like it was only a matter of time before he made it back to his alma mater. And being a defensive coordinator or co-defensive coordinator, like that's the next step for him. And he's at his alma mater. So it's like, I can't blame the guy.
No, not at all. You can't blame him at all. I mean, like, it's a huge step, but he's only been a full-time linebackers coach for a couple of years. Now, technically, he was coaching the linebackers before he got the official position last year, but he's been a position coach for a couple of years. He has worked on some good staffs, obviously, including the one under Marcus Freeman here. And like the guy was always like 8 espressos felt like we're bursting out of his eyeballs when you talk to the guy in a good way. I mean that obviously in a very good way. Frenetic guy, always very emphatic, full of energy. I never noticed what the tats were on his inner arms until someone tweeted, the photo that you were talking about where he's got his arms up and he's flexed, and it's like what Spartan pride was tattooed in there. I wish him well, and again, it's a big step up going from linebacker position coach to defensive coordinator, co-defensive coordinator, and it's at his alma mater, so you completely understand that. I hope it goes well for him, though, because it's not like, great. You've got a guy who's excited about going back to his alma mater to get a promotion to become a co-defensive coordinator, but Pat Fitzgerald has been out of the game for 3 years as a head coach. And I know that, there were some people that were excited about that, but there are a lot of people who have some trepidation about the game. Think about how different the game was in terms of NIL, rev share, the whole works just 3 years ago. So we'll see how that works out. I hope it works out like everybody hopes it works out for Max Bullough, with the exception of next year when Michigan State comes to town, in the year after when Notre Dame goes up to East Lansing. So we'll see how it goes. But it's a great step up for him career-wise, obviously. I don't think anyone's going to begrudge him that.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point, talking about it's, some sort of a leap of faith because he's not been on a Pat Fitzgerald staff before, I believe. And like you said, he hasn't been a head coach in a while. And obviously the landscape of football has really changed. So, you hope it doesn't just all blow up because it could with that kind of combination.
Yeah. And Michigan State is kind of on that dicey little area right now where they're trying to get some things figured out. So we will see how it goes. And again, everyone wishes Max Bullough well, the way he's handled this position group, and Notre Dame searching for its next linebackers coach now. It'll be interesting to see exactly where that goes. But the big picture this week has been about Pete Bevacqua duking it out with Jim Phillips and the ACC. After all the social media stuff, obviously the week started with a bombardment of Pete Bevacqua comments talking about, didn't appreciate what the ACC did, during the run up, the build up, the lead up to the final college football playoff announcement, the smear campaign, some would say. And as Pete Bevacqua said, there's been some damage done, some legitimate damage done. So let me just start with this. Do you think the ACC's actions are bad enough that Notre Dame should just say it's time to end this affiliation?
I feel like that's a very, very loaded question to start the show.
That's why we're here, baby.
I could see how it stings now, but I don't know if it's that big, in my opinion, to just completely blow the whole thing up. I think if you're going to blow it up, you have to have something better in place. And I think we'll get to what some of those options might be throughout the show. But right now, I just don't know if there's anything better. And I don't think you can just blow this up because of what the ACC gives you in terms of, it might not be best opponents, but you're getting, a Power 4 conference to play.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that it ends today, like in the middle of basketball, really not, just the start of basketball season. It's just, like Notre Dame is just going to blow this up right now and move on. But I think if you look big picture, there are some things going on, and we're going to get to that here in just a minute, that would say, well, I think that there have been some things, like the way things are trending, it feels like this could be sort of the straw that broke the camel's back in terms of what Notre Dame and Bevacqua think of this relationship, because there's some pros, there are some cons. USMA 86 says, in the YouTube chat, the whole story of the accidental email will be the final straw. And I think that, because again, like Notre Dame knows things that they're not even talking about publicly, like with that email, the email that was, accidentally reply all, and Notre Dame gets even more information that the ACC thought it was just sharing with the rest of the members of the conference, the full-time members of the conference, from a football and all sports standpoint. But, oh, by the way, Notre Dame happened to be included on that. And it was, the kind of stuff that we're talking about, like anti-Notre Dame stuff. So they know even more intimately, in detail, things that the ACC was plotting and thinking and doing and everything else. And, so I think that plays into it as well. And Pete Bevacqua was not going to completely air that dirty laundry, but he's obviously not happy about how the ACC handled the social media campaign, like pro Miami, anti Notre Dame. And we've talked all about that this week. So I think we're in a situation where Notre Dame definitely needs to be considering other options and figuring out what are legitimate options and what Notre Dame would be willing to entertain in the future. Because I'll just go ahead and play this cut from Josh Pate right now. He was on the Maggie and Perloff radio show, CBS radio show, this week, and that show is heard here in the mornings on Sports Radio WSBT. But Pate had an interesting take on Notre Dame athletic director Pete Bevacqua going after the ACC this week.
Part no one really wants to say, but is probably true. If you zoom it out from, let's say, 20,000 feet to 50,000 feet, Maggie, no one really thinks the ACC is going to exist 5 years from now, 10 years from now. Just because the footing is so uncertain, there's constant rumor of realignment. Just recently, within the past year, I've been on this show and we have discussed two member institutions suing and then withdrawing lawsuits to try and get out of the ACC. So I think what Pete's probably doing is he's probably making that kind of threat that he knows he can make because it'll really be a moot point down the road.
Yes, and this, I think that this has to factor into it as well. And I was kind of trying to dance around it before we played that cut, but I think that does, like, what's the future of the ACC? I'm sure that there will be some kind of ACC 10 years from now, but will it be like another Pac-12 where they are trying to rebuild themselves? Or will it just be, kind of a cast off of 10 to 12 schools remain and the rest disperse? And he was referencing those lawsuits from Florida State and Clemson that they had against the ACC, and those got settled last spring. But it also, what it does is the current grant of rights TV deal that the ACC has with ESPN expires in 2036. But 5 years from now, the other TV deals, for the other conferences come up, and what that settlement that the ACC and Florida State and Clemson had, what it does is it lowers the buyout, the walk fee for those schools to around $75 million, which is not bad considering I think it was up like 700 million or 300, whatever it was. It was a huge astronomical number, but this has restructured that. It's given them like at least short-term appeasement with some more money and those kind of things. But it really feels like the shelf life of the ACC as it stands right now is probably only 5 or 6 years from now. And so, like, if you've got that in mind and you're Notre Dame and things are going to potentially look a lot different, I think that has to factor into it as well, don't you? Mute.
I think that what Pate is saying makes a lot of sense. I think that if you're Pete Bevacqua, you have to kind of, again, zoom out and look at the full picture. If you have a bad relationship with the ACC right now, and you feel like in maybe 5 to 10 years the conference is going to no longer exist, I think you start to strategize your exit plan. And this is obviously the big kind of moving piece that tilted you the other way, where you're like, okay, we do need to kind of figure out how to exit this situation. But more importantly, the years that you stay, I think you now have leverage because of like people have mentioned the smoking guns with the emails. I think you can leverage this to get more of what you want out of the ACC, maybe scheduling wise, maybe, there's different parts of this, relationship agreement that we don't know about. And I think if you're Notre Dame, you can squeeze more out of them and also kind of be like, you know what, we're going to squeeze some out of you and figure out how to leave this situation in 5 or 10 years. And maybe that's being greedy, but I do think like right now you can use it to your advantage and then long-term use it to your advantage as well.
That's very true, because as Josh says here in the YouTube chat, with the ACC accidentally forwarding their plans to Notre Dame, it gives Notre Dame all the proof they need to file their own lawsuit to get out of the ACC. And that's actually, that's exactly right. Like, they've got all the, like, they have more than just, whatever damage they believe social media did to Notre Dame and the campaign that the ACC was waging in social media. It's completely different when you have some emails like that give you some real proof of, real directive coming from the ACC, whether that is short-term or long-term leverage or filing a lawsuit to decide that you want to walk away. They've got a lot of leverage in their hands with what they've got with the email situation.
I completely agree. And I'm trying not to go like too much in depth because it's like there's so many different layers that in the show.
There really are.
The show and this whole topic.
I know. So the biggest pro of the ACC relationship is it gives the Irish 5 guaranteed games a year against Power 4 opponents. That's not nothing. That is something. It's 5 games is almost half of your schedule year in and year out. Now, the biggest con or one of the biggest cons, you can, if you have other cons to this arrangement, I think one of the biggest cons is the fact that by and large, those opponents are just not very good. Like see Boston College this year, see Syracuse this year. And Notre Dame has asked the ACC to give them a heavier rotation of Clemson, Miami, and Florida State. And that is supposed to happen going forward. But for the most part, the ACC has mostly just said, you'll play who we give you. Like Notre Dame is also with Stanford, because Notre Dame played a big part in Stanford being in the ACC, whether you like that or not. But Stanford is part of the ACC. Maybe the ACC holds that against Notre Dame now. I don't know. But the long-running series and what Notre Dame still calls a rivalry with Stanford, like Notre Dame would like Stanford to be part of that as well. But, again, now the ACC says, well, that's just part of the inventory. Now, we're not going to guarantee you Stanford every year. And in fact, they're not giving Notre Dame Stanford every year. And so as a result, that series is also in doubt, along with a higher profile series like USC. So when you look at all this and sort of how the ACC treats the games that they give Notre Dame, and again, if you see other pros and cons, you can throw them in there. But do the pros outweighs the cons in this arrangement for the Fighting Irish when you look at this?
I think for the last decade, it has. I think it has been a good arrangement for Notre Dame. But I can confidently say I think Notre Dame has entered a new threshold of football. And I think that if the ACC isn't willing to be more kind of cooperative or lenient with giving Notre Dame more of those top-end opponents, then I don't think the pros outweigh the cons. Like it has prior. I think it definitely did during, the Brian Kelly era. But now I feel like Notre Dame, I think you could, if that's what you're going to get, I think Notre Dame could play low-end SEC teams all the time, look better, and probably have similar results. And maybe that's a little bit of, getting my head over my skis here a little bit. But I think with Marcus Freeman, the level of recruiting we've seen and the on-field, just like you can see it. Notre Dame is a faster, more athletic. They can go toe-to-toe with, I think, anyone in the country, just like they would have this year in the playoffs. So if the ACC is going to give you their bottom-tier schools and you beat them 70-7 and you're up 35-3 at halftime, and that no longer can get you, anywhere in the committee's eyes because you need that at-large bid, then I just don't think the pros are going to outweigh the cons anymore.
Yeah, because, like one of the other pros to this whole thing is, okay, you've got a home for your Olympic sports. But, from a pure football standpoint, just look at this year. Notre Dame played Miami, NC State, Boston College, Pittsburgh, Syracuse, and Stanford. Doesn't do anything from a home game standpoint to move the needle, for either fans or NBC. And again, Notre Dame wants better quality opponents, but the ACC won't give them to them. They're basically, again, like you're going to play who we want you to play. And even if they did, the quality of opponents is so unpredictable from year to year because look at Syracuse. Yeah, look at Syracuse and Boston College as examples. If those two teams had been on the schedule last year with first-year head coaches Syracuse last year, Syracuse and Boston College were bowl teams last year. But this year they're both dumpster fires. And so, you go from one year to the next and look at Georgia Tech. They were a decent team last year when Notre Dame played them. They were a college football playoff contender for most of the year and would have been a much better, a really nice resume point if Notre Dame had been able to play and beat Georgia Tech this year, and then, again, Notre Dame, look at Florida State as an example. Notre Dame played Florida State before the 13-0 season, did not play them obviously during the 13-0 season. And then they played them a year after the 13-0 season when they were horrible last year, and they beat them 52-3. So, you can't even count on the big names in the ACC to be consistently good. Look what Florida State has been, even, a little bit better this year, but still not as good as they were when they went 13-0. So even if the ACC did guarantee Notre Dame that they were going to get to play more Miami, Florida State, and Clemson, who knows what any of those teams are going to be from one year to the next.
Yeah, and I think that's the tough part, because then you would almost be cherry picking your opponents, maybe if not every season, every 2 seasons. And I think that's where it would get kind of messy with scheduling and logistics. But again, I don't know, until Notre Dame has someone as cooperative as the ACC. I don't know what a better solution is, because I don't think, I definitely know the Big Ten won't do it. I don't think it'd be worth it for Notre Dame to do the Big 12. So really all that leaves is the SEC, in my opinion.
Right.
And I know the SEC would want Notre Dame, because that's money. They'd be appreciative of that money.
We're going to get into more to some of that, including independence, like what independence looks like from a full-fledged independent standpoint, which they used to be back when the Olympic sports were affiliated with the ACC. Ghost of ND in the YouTube chat says, didn't Florida State just back out of next year's game? They didn't necessarily back out of it. The ACC is going to the 9-game schedule next year. And so that means that everyone had to pair, schedules had to be reworked, basically. So yes, technically Notre Dame and Florida State not playing next year, but unlike the Miami situation last year, which again, it's just amazing how little that basically never brought up in national circles, that Miami was supposed to play here last year, but because they overscheduled, put Florida A&M on their schedule, the ACC did not make them honor that. They let them put Florida A&M on their schedule instead, and so the ACC ended up throwing on Louisville to replace them. But I think everyone would have rather seen Notre Dame play Miami here at home. And like I've said, if that would have been a Miami home game last year, there's no way Miami cancels that. There's just no way. But because it was a Notre Dame home game, they got off the hook and they got out of it. So, but they'll come here maybe next year. Supposed to come here next year.
You hope.
Yes, that's right. Okay, we're going to continue this conversation with some of the stuff that Jesse was talking about. We'll hear from Pete Bevacqua about remaining independent going forward, because I think that is a question as well. Just how tenable going forward is independence now with everything going on, because you've got all this other stuff going on, like our athletic director is really going to try to freeze out Notre Dame and those kind of things, because of the fact, because they found out about, the fact that Notre Dame is going to be guaranteed a playoff spot if they are ranked in the top 12 going forward starting next year. We'll talk about some of that stuff and what some other conference options could look like if Notre Dame were to walk away from the ACC. With Jesse Stiers, I'm Sean Stiers, Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Budweiser's weekday sports beat with IrishBreakdown.com continues, talking a little Notre Dame ACC on today's show and whether or not maybe it's time for the Irish to think about packing up and leaving the conference for good, along with Jesse Stiers. I'm Sean Stiers. Stymie in the YouTube chat says, can Notre Dame just cancel a random ACC opponent and schedule Indiana A&M instead? Oh, that'd be fantastic. That'd be fantastic if they could. I think you're muted right now, just so you know.
Oh, yeah.
All right. So independence and what that looks like going forward. Pete Bevacqua, Notre Dame athletic director, it was a week ago today. He was on the Pat McAfee show, and he talked about Notre Dame remaining independent going forward.
A lot of arguments against you guys being independent and an independent potentially taking up a college football playoff spot versus teams that have to play a conference schedule. What do you kind of say about that, and what do they say to you that you think like is fair or not fair whenever it comes to you guys being independent?
Well, you think about it, Pat, the regular season is more important for us than anybody because we don't have the opportunity to play in a conference championship. We can't play in the SEC championship or the Big 12 or the Big 10 or the ACC championship. And like you said in the lead into this conversation, there's teams that are playing in these conference championships, particularly in the SEC and the Big 10, that regardless of the outcome, they're both going to get a spot in the CFP. There's comfort in that. And a lot of people talked about last year that magical run we had to the national championship, and they talked about the CFP economics and the money that Notre Dame earns through that. But they didn't talk about the other side of the coin, whereas if we don't make it in, we don't get any money. We kind of, we eat what we kill. And so we're kind of out there dangling on our own and trying to schedule the best teams we can. You know, when you look at our future schedules, we have Texas and Alabama and hoping to get something done here with USC and, it's an annual series with Clemson. So we feel really bullish about our independence. It's something, it's part of the DNA of Notre Dame. And, when you have alignment like we do at this university, when you have a coach like Coach Freeman, and I joke with people, like if we went into a laboratory and had to create the perfect coach for Notre Dame, you'd walk out with Marcus Freeman. And he's not just our football coach. He has become such a part of the fabric of this university. You go to a women's basketball game, a hockey game, you walk around campus, you see Marcus with his wife, Joanna, you see him with his kids. We're blessed to have him here at Notre Dame, and he's a big part why we can stay independent, because you got to be relevant when you're independent. If you're not winning, you become irrelevant in a second, and we've got to keep winning, and we got to keep these seasons going like they have here the last few years.
I mean, we eat what we kill, and you got to remain relevant to be independent. The two money quotes from that whole thing.
Yeah, I love the we eat what we kill quote. I didn't realize, I saw it earlier in the week, and I didn't realize that was the complete full context of it. But I mean, it makes sense because no one's going to want to play you if you're not relevant. And if you're not, you're not in and out season, a very good team. So it's a tough line to balance, I think, because being independent, it's like, okay, we could go out here and schedule, what the world thinks we need to schedule every week and go to, Georgia, Texas A&M, Ohio State, Oregon, that sort of schedule. But if you do that and you start going, 6-6 every season, then obviously that's, you're not meeting your goals. So being fully independent and having this kind of freedom of scheduling comes with, I think, a lot of challenges that people don't realize.
Casey says not playing at a bowl cost. Oh, yeah, it cost ESPN millions. Yes, it cost ESPN more than it cost Notre Dame. By Notre Dame not playing in that bowl, when you listen to all the whining and crying on that side, it cost ESPN more than it cost Notre Dame because the payout was not so large, and it was really not large at all, especially in comparison to being in the college football playoff last year. Going to the Pop-Tarts Bowl would have been a break-even proposition at most for Notre Dame with what they would have gotten as payout from that game. It would have been basically, we're going to pay you for your team's time put into practicing for the bowl game. That's about it. And it looked like you wanted to say something. Go ahead. Okay.
No.
Okay. So the independence aspect of this, One, I think that Pete Bevacqua, being a Notre Dame alum, and he talked in his press conference this week, and I think he's talked on, some of the interviews that he's done, that he literally came out of the womb a Notre Dame fan. Like his whole life, he was a Notre Dame fan, grew up a Notre Dame fan, went to Notre Dame, was here in the Lou Holtz era, like the whole thing, like Notre Dame man. So I think that like independence is part of the core of Pete Bevacqua. So it means a lot to him. And I think that he will hold out absolutely as long as he can for Notre Dame football to remain independent. Now, again, we started this by talking about, okay, does Notre Dame move away from the ACC and look at some other options? And it does not feel like an arrangement with the Big Ten similar to what Notre Dame has with the ACC is an option. I think, from everything that I've heard, like the Big Ten it's either you're all in or you're not in at all. So like it feels like the Big Ten is off the table in terms of any agreement going forward. The SEC feels like an option. I still don't know about the Big 12 in spite of Brett Yormark with his remarks and stuff like that this week. Well, I guess we'll wait and see. But before the ACC agreement, Notre Dame was fully independent. With its Olympic sports playing in the Big East, it didn't have a formal conference agreement, even though the Big East, because you still had teams like Syracuse and Pitt and Boston College playing football in the Big East back then. Like you saw them on the schedule a lot more often, and a lot of people, talk about. Okay, well, you just move the Olympic sports back to the Big East, and Notre Dame goes it alone as a full-fledged independent. Personally, and I've seen, there's a couple different comments here in our YouTube chat. Blackjack says independence is great. I think remaining independent is on borrowed time. And Robert says the only reason to join a conference is for TV revenue, which we don't need. I would disagree with that because I think that where college football is right now with these big conferences, and because you are getting some pushback from a lot of other teams and a lot of other conferences across the country, and the fact that you're like all these conferences are moving to the 9-game schedules, I don't know if being like that full-fledged, putting together an entire 12-game schedule without the help of a conference like the ACC plugging in 5 games for you, I don't know if that's possible in today's landscape. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't think that being fully dependent is sustainable. And I think that long term, it would cause a lot of damage to the university. I think there always has to be some sort of agreement with the conference where you're getting, where football is getting 4 or 5 opponents per season. And then also the rest of your sports are also, competing in those in that conference as well.
Yeah. I mean, I don't think that you can do it without some kind of conference partnership because like there's not a Pac-12 anymore. And so now you've got 4, Power 4. You've got the Power 4 conferences. And again, they're all playing a 9-game schedule. Because like, here's what a schedule looked like pre-ACC days. I went back, I think this was, 2004, 2005. So you pretty much, from a Notre Dame perspective, every year had Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Stanford, Navy, Boston College, Pittsburgh, and USC. Now, obviously, there were, like Stanford and Michigan were on and off the schedule a couple of different times. But that was, like, those were pretty much the staple of the schedule for a long time. Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, Stanford, Navy, Boston College, Pittsburgh, USC. Well, Boston College and Pittsburgh are in the Big East or are in the ACC now. Stanford is in the ACC now. And Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue in the Big Ten. And again, they're playing a 9-game schedule. So I don't know if it's realistic to think that I don't think it's realistic to think that you could get like 8 teams, for example, to say we're going to play you every year. Like, because that's what it would take. Do you think?
Yeah, but how stale would that be too? Just the same 8 teams
right,
a year.
Right. You're practically in a conference doing it that way as well. But that's kind of what it was with those 8. And then they obviously, had 3-4 teams rotate on and off the schedule. Like there were a couple of years they were playing home and homes with BYU and Washington and Tennessee and Texas A&M and, like on and on and on. I agree. Like your schedule would get very stale very quick.
And I think you'd be highly criticized as well for just playing the same teams every year. With kind of how the new, the college football playoff, the committee, everything that comes with it, I just don't think that would be a good look, literally playing the same teams every year.
Well, if Michigan and USC were two of them, I don't think you'd have, that's not going to bother too many people. But similar to where you are right now, you're just going to have to make sure that you're beefing it up by trying to go out and get Texas and Alabama and these different schools to rotate on and off your schedule. Ohio State, obviously, they just did that. But, like even go back to look at Wisconsin. When that home and home with Wisconsin was signed, it's been 7 or 8 years ago now since that even happened. Like Wisconsin was still a pretty consistently good team year in and year out. Look where Wisconsin is right now. So like playing Wisconsin is going to do nothing for you next year unless they magically have some big turnaround and they're better next year. So it's like it's tough putting these schedules together to begin with, but if you're going to do it as a full standalone independent, you're going to have to lock up at least 7 or 8 teams, to sign they've got a long-term contract with Clemson right now. They don't know what they're going to have with USC. They've got Navy right now. So really Clemson and Navy are their only 2 guarantees, right now outside of the ACC going forward in terms of long-term deals. And you're going to have to do more of those if you want to be a full-fledged independent without any help from a conference helping you fill in your schedule with 4, 5, 6 games. That's tough.
Yeah, that's real tough. I think, having 5, 6 long-term partners like you're talking about, Navy, what used to be USC, Clemson, those sort of arrangements, but you need to have another pool where someone else is doing the work and you're just they're rotating through, and that's where obviously the conference part comes into it.
Exactly. Again, like going back to what we were talking about earlier, that's one of the biggest pros of the ACC is even though the opponents might not be great, at least they're Power 4 opponents, and you know that you're going to get them every year. You're going to get 5 every year. What about a hybrid model where Notre Dame has a football agreement like with the SEC, but the Olympic sports are in the Big East? So like you're breaking it up a little bit, but you've got an agreement for football games. You're going to get, something similar to what you've got with the ACC from a football standpoint with the SEC, but your Olympic sports reside permanently in the Big East. Do you think that could be doable?
My gut reaction is to just do all one. Like, I think breaking it up would be a bit harder. But then the more you think about it, what benefits Notre Dame football, I think, doesn't necessarily benefit maybe the rest of Notre Dame sports, and especially the Olympic sports, because I just think that, like we all know, football has become its own beast, really, compared to the rest of the sports. And so whatever Notre Dame has to do football-wise, I'm okay with. And if that differs from the Olympic sports, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think that the Big East could be an option. And I think that certainly, like I said before, I think the SEC could be an option as well. I think the Big East would really benefit Notre Dame Olympic sport wise.
I think so too, because you'd have a lot of, it's basically the Big East has become, all the Catholic schools, your Marquette and DePaul, some teams that Notre Dame was playing back in the day. UConn is in there. So like, especially from a basketball and women's basketball specifically, you'd have that rivalry built in, but you got Creighton and Butler and, a lot of those kind of teams. That's what you'd get in, so you would have similar, I think, beliefs, philosophies, and academics really as well, or, like more similarly aligned academics and beliefs and those kind of things with them in the Big East as opposed to what they're in right now. And, most of the trips, it feels like, would be, like a lot closer than probably what they've got right now
Right.
Well, but you're saying, so what you still think, like if you had your first preference, you would just rather, like, if Notre Dame is going to pull out of the ACC, you would rather see them, like, for example, just lock up with the SEC, do the exact same deal with the SEC with all the Olympic sports, playing basketball and baseball and everything else in the SEC.
Yeah, I think that's what I would want. But if it came down to it and push came to shove, I wouldn't mind seeing that hybrid model where something might benefit the Olympic sports a little bit more. And the reason why I really liked the Big East too is because, like you were saying, geographically, it helps Notre Dame too, less travel, that sort of thing. And I think, again, people are going to say, oh, it's now business and stuff, especially with the NIL, but like the student athlete part of it is still a thing, like the classes, the exams, and that sort of stuff. So if you can cut down on travel time and less tutors and all of that stuff, I think it makes a difference, especially at Notre Dame, where they do stress the academic side of things.
Yeah, and I mean, let's be honest, as Pete Bevacqua said, with like the fact that Notre Dame, he didn't say this specifically, but Notre Dame made $20 million for going to the national championship game last year. They're going to make $0 this year for being left out of the college football playoff and not going to a bowl game. So there's a big difference. Like that's on Notre Dame. And as he said, they have to stay relevant to be able to remain independent. And right now, Notre Dame is every bit relevant. It's just a matter of sort of, like this, like I would not want to have to be the one in charge of putting together football schedules. When you look at how far out you have to do it.
There's really no winning.
No, there's not at all.
Unless you get to play, Alabama Central and Florida A&M,
Right.
like
Unless you get to plug in your FCSs and yeah, exactly.
you can always find 2 or 3 of those willing to play.
Right. All right, we will continue and put a bow on this conversation when we come back next. We've got rapid fire coming up in hour number 2. Still plenty of Notre Dame talk going on that we'll have in rapid fire as well. It's Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Budweiser's weekday sports beat with irishbreakdown.com, winding down hour number 1, rapid fire on the way. Hour number 2, been talking about Notre Dame and what could happen with the ACC in the future, what could happen with Notre Dame in the future in terms of independence and everything else. Bernie in the YouTube chat says, help me, why are we calling the other sports Olympic sports? Well, it's simple. They play them in the Olympics. Basketball, baseball, volleyball, all those sports, they are sports that are played in the Olympics. Hence, Olympic sports. Football, not played in the Olympics. So, are you, let me, we're kind of at the place where it feels like we're both good with Notre Dame walking away from the ACC as long as they can find a similar arrangement with another conference going forward, right?
Yeah, I think Notre Dame has a lot of leverage to, ask for more in the upcoming years, but also be planning a way to maybe find a similar agreement with another conference. And my first preference would be the SEC. I think everyone at this point, if you play against the SEC, you're going to get respect, right? And I think Notre Dame has entered, again, this era with Marcus Freeman. Again, maybe I'm just overconfident, and, who knows? Maybe Marcus Freeman, if you ask all these idiots too, is going to leave tomorrow to go to the Giants. But I think under Marcus Freeman, they're playing a brand of football that can go toe-to-toe with the SEC, definitely with the Big Ten. So why not?
The
at this
SEC,
point,
like when you look at
everyone.
the SEC versus the Big Ten, the SEC, when they decided to go to 9 conference games, the Big Ten had already been in the 9 conference game, arena. The SEC said, we're going to go to 9, but we're also going to require all of our teams to play a 10th game against an outside Power 4 opponent.
Mm-hmm.
The Big Ten is the only one of the Power 4 conferences that has not made that decision. So it feels like that sets itself up very well going forward for a potential relationship with Notre Dame, because one, you wouldn't have to worry about all this criticism of, who are you playing? You're playing all these garbage ACC teams. If you're going to have Notre Dame play 5 SEC teams a year, now, they would balance it. I'm sure they're not just going to say, okay, Texas and Georgia and Oklahoma, you're all going to play Notre Dame every year. Like they would, do their best to balance that kind of thing out, but there would be more teeth to it. And so Notre Dame would be more aligned in what they were doing with an SEC type schedule. And then you also don't have to worry about going out and signing extra contracts with SEC schools, because what Notre Dame wants is to give its schedule some teeth so that they are on par with the top schools in the SEC when they're, at the end of the season, when college football playoff resume time comes around and they're making these selections, they want a couple tough teams on there to give themselves a little bit of oomph with it. And then you can go out and schedule whoever else. I'd be really curious to see, like, if Notre Dame did a deal with the SEC, what ACC, how agreeable some of these ACC teams would be to playing Notre Dame potentially going forward, if that's what Notre Dame, because again, like, you've got to fill your schedule out someplace, right? And there's only so many places you can go. And with all these schools, gravitating toward the middle, I know a lot of people talk about super conference, super league, or whatever. I think that's still at a minimum 15 years into the future. It definitely feels like it's pulling in that direction, especially like we started off talking about Florida State and Clemson and what could happen with them. But I would be in on it. Like I from a football standpoint, I love the idea of, an arrangement like that with the SEC. The rest of the sports, though, Olympic sports, not so much. Like, I'm not as in on
Do you think
that.
they compete in the Olympic sports like baseball, softball?
You cut out there are you asking if they could compete?
Yeah, could baseball, softball, men's
SEC.
basketball?
Not in the SEC. I think men's basketball, women's basketball both could. Now, they're both SEC's become a better conference on both sides, both men's and women's, over the last few years. But I think that I think basketballs could compete in the SEC for sure, but like baseball, I mean, it's already an uphill climb in the ACC, and the SEC is the best, college baseball conference in America. They would just be buried if they moved over to there.
Yeah, and I think that's where some of my pause or discomfort would be is would you potentially be drowning the rest of your sports at the sake of just football?
Right. Exactly. Do you think that 10 years from now, is Notre Dame's football still an independent?
Yes.
I agree. I think that they will be as well. And again, I think it goes back to the guy leading the athletic department. Pete Bevacqua is going to go down fighting tooth and nail to ensure that Notre Dame football remains independent for as long as possible. And he's still a relatively young guy. You know, he's not that old. He's still in his mid-50s right now.
Yeah, I think you make a good point. Pete Bevacqua is going to do, and I think that's the way he's kind of come off in these interviews that he's done after, the Sunday reveal, that Notre Dame loves its independence and it's going to remain independent. And I think Notre Dame is going to remain independent until everyone is independent. And I think what I mean when I say that is when you just have a big kind of like super league where every team, all these teams are in one pool and they all just kind of play each other. And I don't think Notre Dame would get uninvited to that party.
DK says your recruiting in baseball would pick up, maybe nominally, but like Notre Dame would be the
Man, but
all
none of those
the
teams have to play baseball in the North.
yeah, no one wants to play baseball in where it snows in April. Robin
Facilities aren't up there.
Robin says, what would you do with the lacrosse teams if you're in the SEC? Well, this is not a shot at lacrosse, but obviously lacrosse is not going to be at the forefront of any of those decisions. I'm sure that there is a conference that lacrosse would be able to find, just like hockey is in the Big Ten right now. They would find some conference, that where they could find a home. It just wouldn't be with the rest of the sports. Indy Forever 72 says they will not be independent 3 years from now, much less 10. I want what some of you two are drinking. There's no way 3 years from now. Like today is December
I think 10
12th,
is the good over-under number.
December 12th, 2025. You'll have to think of what my next wager is, what I will do if Notre Dame is not independent 3 years from. There's no way. There's zero chance that Notre Dame will be anything but independent 3 years from now. There's nothing with Pete Bevacqua as the athletic director that is going to push Notre Dame out of being independent in 3 years. One, they're going to be back in the college football playoff next year. Like like on December 12th, 2025, I will guarantee that today, that they'll be back in the college football playoff next year, which goes back to the relevance and the money making and everything else that Bevacqua has talked about. So I'm very confident in that.
We got to get you down on the board.
I know. I'm gonna have to think of some wagers. All right, we'll take a timeout. Rapid fire coming up. Hour number 2. Bobby Hensley joins us. Should be interesting as always. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. Oh, yeah, the gang's all here. Hour 2, rapid fire. Budweiser's weekday sports beat with irishbreakdown.com. I just realized I forgot up to put in. There it is, the clean background. Jesse is what's that smirk on your face all about?
Obby's here.
Yeah, can hardly tell, huh?
That makes you happy, huh?
Yeah.
That makes him feel smarter, so that's for sure.
Some interesting comments that I've seen coming out of New York City. Mike Berardino from the South Bend Tribune is out there covering Jeremiah Love at the Heisman ceremony. I'll talk about that here in just a minute. We got a super chat on the YouTube side that we'll get to here in a second as well. Let me start with this, though. Fill in the blank. All the blowback this week in the wake of Notre Dame missing the college football playoffs has proven blank.
I'll keep this PG. I wish I could say what I really want to say. What it's proven is that people still don't know a thing about Notre Dame, and they think they do. They think they have all these, preconceived notions of what Notre Dame should do and what they shouldn't do and who they should play and how the players feel and if they should play a bowl game or not, and just go down the list of everything that's come up in the last week. And it's like, you guys just don't know anything. And it like the Big 12 commissioner can be added to that list talking about how, Notre Dame got saved by the ACC. Oh, no, but really the Notre Dame saved the ACC and the rest of college football. So it's just like, it just shows that people have these preconceived ideas, notions of what Notre Dame should be, who they should be. And it's like, if you actually did a little bit of research, you would understand why they are firmly in this position they are right now and how beneficial it is.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. My word would be important. I think it's important because it shows how relevant Notre Dame is. I mean, it's a week in now, and there's been other big stories in college football, and still one that keeps coming up is Notre Dame not going to a bowl or not making the playoff.
Right. End of the week. Yeah. And
there's a lot of other stuff going on. I'm not trying to get into it. I'm just saying that's how relevant Notre Dame is. They're polarizing. People care. They matter. And, their conference tie with the ACC, I don't know that it doesn't help the ACC more than it helps Notre Dame. They're just getting a bunch of bad matchups. I heard you guys talking about if they should join or if they will be joining a conference in the next 10 years. And if they did, it wouldn't be the ACC because of how weak that partnership has been for football.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's important to see how much Notre Dame still matters to college football. And then if you want to talk about freezing out or bowl games or the tournament, it doesn't. I think it shows that Notre Dame actually is very important to the landscape of college football.
That's exactly right. And I think that, along with the importance, it shows the relevance, and it also shows how polarizing Notre Dame remains. And I think that if you can sit at the top of the polarization chart, which I think in college athletics, Notre Dame is like at the very top of that pyramid, wherever you want to put anyone next, like what's even close to Notre Dame in terms of like who polarizes the college landscape the way Notre Dame does? Like anyone, anything? Like,
no, I
can
can't.
You think of anything?
No. And even it might be a year by year basis, but there's no one that year by year constantly over time is polarizing like Notre Dame.
No, that's exactly right. Because, again, like look at the list of other schools that opted out of bowl games this year. None of them have made the lead of any of these ESPN shows or radio shows or podcasts. It's all about Notre Dame. That's what the whole conversation this week has been. It's been about Notre Dame. It hasn't been about, all these like BYU has been complaining this week. You had to look, but BYU has been complaining about being left out of the college football playoff. Is anyone out there, arguing for or against BYU? No, because nobody cares. Because, like Notre Dame sits up here in terms of how polarizing they are. And when you're polarizing, that means that you can lead a show with them, just like the Dallas Cowboys, just like the Los Angeles Lakers, just like the New York Yankees. Like you can lead a show with that, not as much Yankees anymore because baseball, unfortunately, keeps dropping in terms of the national conversation. But those other sports are all going to lead A blocks on any show that you want to talk about, whether it's ESPN or radio or anywhere else. And that's where Notre Dame sits. And that's why they've gobbled up almost all the conversation this week until the Sharon Moore stuff came up a couple of days ago. Everyone's just shaking their head and staring at me blankly.
No, you almost are speaking like you're angry. I'm scared. I don't want to go against that. No, we've always known that's the case. That's the whole problem we've had all year. Like the USC stuff, if they're going to play again, if it's a rivalry, who does it help more or less? All of this stuff is because of how much Notre Dame matters to every part of college football. That's why I think it's empty threats by these conferences to freeze them out or whatever.
I do too, and that's I'm glad you brought that up. Go ahead.
No, I just think
I don't want to sound angry at you.
Well, you never sound happy, that's for sure. But no, you're right. It's like Dallas Cowboys. Whether you like them or not, or
only happy when it rains, Bobby.
Okay, but you're right. That it's polarizing, and that's a great word. But as long as they're making noise, it means you still matter. Notre Dame went through some lulls in the early 2000s or mid 2000s to 2010s. Notre Dame matters. And the fact that everyone is so upset they didn't go to a bowl game, I wonder if Notre Dame is going to be the reason why the bowl structure change is coming up. There'll be less bowl games and less mattering of the bowl.
Something else to blame Notre Dame for is what you're saying.
And that's exactly what it'll be. Even though all these other schools skipped out, even though these bowls are going away, was it the LA Bowl? They announced that this will be their last one, and there was another. I don't remember which one. But
nobody knows there is an LA Bowl.
It's my point.
Yes, exactly.
But there's like 42 bowl games or something.
Like when you look at the list of bowl games that are like it's all like mid-year type stuff because all of the good bowl games are now part of the college football playoff. Like there's a reason it's not that big a deal anymore.
I'm not trying to freeze Jesse out like the SEC with Notre Dame, but the bowl games, they don't mean anything to teams right now, 13 through maybe 35.
Right.
There's no point to them. Now, a team like, because I went there, Ball State, something like that, it matters to them to go to the bowl game and get the win. And those are the teams that really want to go and they still matter to. But I think the whole bowl structure will be changing based on some of the stuff from Notre Dame and the other teams opting out.
I think the biggest thing I'd add to that is you're going to see more of this too as the playoff expands, because I think more of those bowls are just going to get sucked up into the playoff as a whole. And I think, everyone would blame Notre Dame, but it would be really the greed of college football and making the college football playoff that would kill bowls, not specifically Notre Dame. Notre Dame just kind of finally had the guts because they got screwed over to say, you know what, we aren't going to play in a bowl game now. And I think that's all it really took. And I think especially now with, NIL and guys preserving draft stock and not playing in bowl games, bowl games are rapidly declining. And I do think it's sad, but at the same time, I think it benefits a lot of the schools like you were talking about, Bobby, like the Ball States, maybe the, Conference USA's, the bottom tier of the Power Four conferences. Like that is still something to play for those teams. But you heard Notre Dame talk about it. Like, we're not going to go play in a bowl game. We were gearing up to be in a playoff run.
And I think the aspect, but this is what the Notre Dame captains said when they made this vote, that we want to play with the team that we played with for these, last 12 games. All the opt-outs, like that's a huge factor. You're like, does anyone think Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price were going to go play in the Pop-Tarts Bowl for Notre Dame? Like they were, anyone who has any draft stock was going to opt out of that game. And you've got a slew of other guys who were already injured anyway. So there's a pretty long list of guys who would not have been playing in that game. It wouldn't have been the same Notre Dame team. And like, that doesn't, like the win or the loss, I don't think that factored into their decision at all. It's just that they knew there was going to be a big pool of guys and they wouldn't be playing with the same team out there.
Completely agree.
I don't even know if that was the point, because now you at least let the guys look into their transfer options earlier. You can give a little bow to your own season. You don't need the bowl game. I don't understand the bowl games, like I say, from the teams that just missed the playoff all the way down to the mid majors that it matters to. I don't think they're relevant. And like the holdouts, and we've seen it. Notre Dame is one of the reasons why it happened. If Jalen Smith didn't have to play in a bowl game, his draft stock would have been higher. And how many millions of dollars?
Well, he didn't have to. He could have opted out.
That's what I'm saying.
Out. Yeah, exactly.
And nobody looks back now on bowl wins and losses like they used to. It's antiquated.
Right. And, like, honestly, the only thing that you think about 5 years down the road, and I said this, the year that Notre Dame went into whichever bowl that was, they had 9 wins going into a bowl game because, the guy I was doing the show with back then, we always debated how much more, this is like 7-8 years ago, and we're debating, the relevance of bowl games. And, his thing was always, well, it's just an exhibition game, basically. They're definitely exhibition games now. But even then, like, the thing that you could look at, if you were a 9-win team going into a bowl game and you got that 10th win, now you look back and you can say, look at all these double-digit win seasons. That's ultimately all it means. And Notre Dame was already a 10-2 team anyway. So, from a macro view, like, literally a year from now, no one's going to be saying, well, look at Notre Dame. They remember, like, they backed out of a bowl last year. No one's even going to remember it next year. A year from now, you go through all these different news cycles and a season and everything else. No one's going to remember it a year from now. It's just all magnified right now.
One of the first radio shows I ever did with you was years ago, and you were asking, how much does winning your bowl game propel you into the next season? That was one of the topics that we had. And I don't think it means anything because you change so many players all the time. And it's like Jesse said, with expanded playoff, it's going to get even worse. Like, you might lose 3 games, by November, and your whole team, like Caleb Williams, he started opting out before the regular season was over. I just don't think that any of it is what it used to be.
I want to get this next topic because Jesse's going to have to leave us early tonight, and I wanted to make sure that we got this. There's an interesting call-in from Mad Dog Radio on Sirius XM Radio earlier this week that's made the round. So I'm going to play this call. This is from Mad Dog Radio.
How are you?
Annoyed today, Chris. I'm a Pop-Tart organizer and sponsor.
Oh, you are?
You're
a Pop-Tart guy?
I'm a Pop-Tart guy. And you'd be surprised the amount of people who are Pop-Tart guys, industrialists in this country who are Pop-Tart guys. These are wonderful charities in Orlando, and we just got screwed.
Well,
Phillips,
what's the conversation?
Hold it.
Because you're talking about Notre Dame.
Hold it. Let me make my point.
Go ahead.
Phillips, Saturday morning, told us one ACC team was going to get in. And somebody asked him, if Duke wins, we get Notre Dame? He wouldn't say yes, but he just smiled at us. Now.
Interesting. Go ahead.
Do you know what the effect of Georgia Tech BYU compared to Notre Dame BYU is?
Oh, it's huge.
Well,
huge.
You ever heard of the BCE, the bowl
What's that?
Contribution earnings?
Yes.
It's 70, our estimate, it's a $75 million difference to the Orlando community.
Mike, it sucks for the Orlando community. It sucks for Pop-Tarts. It sucks for the Pop-Tart Bowl. But Notre Dame is doing it because it sucks. They are doing it not necessarily to screw Orlando, but they're doing it to take it to ESPN. They're doing it to take it to the bowl system. You told us we were in the playoff. We did not play a game this weekend, nor did Miami, and Alabama, who you jumped ahead of us last week, just got destroyed. You did not have the guts to take that SEC team out of the field, period. Even if you thought they should have been. You also did not have the guts to leave an ACC team out of the playoff. And Jim Phillips smiling, saying Notre Dame.
Okay, so there's a call in from Mad Dog Radio, guy affiliated with the Pop-Tarts Bowl, says they got a wink from Jim Phillips the day before the college football playoff seeding was announced that the ACC was going to get a team in the playoffs one way or another, and that the Pop-Tarts Bowl was going to get Notre Dame. And first, I do want to say that, like, that guy, calling in, like, is the stereotype of every bowl representative I've seen, and like some of these introductory press conferences. That's another story.
Yeah.
Are you in or out on this conspiracy, Jesse?
I'm in on the conspiracy, and I have to get a clarification first. Who is the host of the show?
I'm not sure. That was not Chris Mad Dog Russo. There is because Mad Dog Radio is a channel, so there are multiple.
Okay.
There are multiple shows on the channel. That was not Chris Russo hosting the show that you heard there.
Yeah, and I thought he said it perfectly. Like, Notre Dame they didn't have the guts to kick Alabama out. They didn't have the guts to say no to an ACC team, even though Miami couldn't make it to the ACC championship.
Right.
Duke ruins the party and wins the whole thing. And so I'm in on the conspiracy that everyone knew before the weekend started, there was no circumstance where Notre Dame was getting in. And I think that was even more obvious when they put Alabama in front of Notre Dame randomly and used the scapegoat of them beating a 5-7 Auburn team in a tough rivalry game. As soon as that decision was made, I think that everyone, like, within the kind of circle of knowledge, like, we're not a part of that circle of knowledge. Jim Phillips is part of that circle of knowledge. Everyone knew at that point that there was nothing Notre Dame could do. And so that they started making deals with people like the Pop-Tarts Bowl of, oh, you're going to get Notre Dame. And they said it with a lot of confidence because they thought that was, they knew Notre Dame was going to be out, but they didn't know Notre Dame was going to say, F you, we're not playing in your Pop-Tart Bowl.
I'm buying in as well, kind of like you said, but I think everybody wants information. So you said we're not a part of that circle, but anyone that is, Mr. Pop-Tart apparently is.
Hey, you'd be surprised at how many people are Pop-Tarts guys, Bobby.
Yeah. So
that was hilarious.
So I think everybody just wants to feel like they know something. And then sometimes even when they don't know, they just lie about it and say they knew. It's funny, if you're looking in our chat, they're talking about how relevant Notre Dame's ratings are. And I think if it's 70 million for one bowl game, that kind of says that Notre Dame's relevant, right? So
yeah, that
kind of solves that issue as well. But no, I think for sure I don't know if it's a conspiracy. I think it's just normal. I think it's knowledge. I think they probably did give them a non-answer that they took a certain way. But I also wasn't surprised to see Notre Dame opt out real quick right after, like a snap, call, and poker. All right, we're on the platform, we're done. I'm not even I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I think they knew, but they were hoping to get Notre Dame. But
see, and that's the thing, because all these bowls want Notre Dame, and they don't care about Notre Dame. They're just like they want the money. That's all they really care about. Right. And their eyes lit up at the prospect of getting Notre Dame. And so, just like Notre Dame had the rug pulled out from underneath them, Pop-Tarts had the rug kind of pulled out from underneath them as well, because Jim Phillips, again, he's not giving them any guarantees, but he's got a little glint in his eye, and he gives them the wink and the nod. And it's like, hey, you guys we're still going to take care of you, because Notre Dame's, they're part of our bowl agreement, and we know we're getting a team in one way or another. Even though the ACC wasn't smart enough to have a clause in its own tiebreaker when you've got a freaking 5-way tie, you're not smart enough to just say, look, first tiebreaker, when you've got multiple teams involved in these ties, who's the highest ranked team? Put them in the conference championship game. Because why are these conference championship games supposed to be around? To get the best teams in, to give the best teams have a chance to get in the college football playoff. That's all they're about right now, especially the ACC. Like, the SEC's is still making money. I believe the Big 12s is still making money, and the Big 10 as well. ACC never even sells that game out to begin with. The whole idea is to give your best teams the opportunity to get in the college football playoff now. And the ACC didn't even have enough forethought to put in a tiebreaker like that to give themselves a chance, but they got the backdoor deal. They knew they were getting a team in one way or another. And like the fact that this guy is sitting there, within eye shot of Jim Phillips a day before, getting that kind of, wink, I completely am in on it.
But it cascades, right? Because then how about the bowl game that has to take like a 5-7 MAC team into it, because everybody that's opted out,
it's a domino effect. It just keeps going down.
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, where were we? DK is asking if finals are over. Finals start next week. So they are not over. Finals are next week at Notre Dame. Jesse?
I remembered a thought I had. I'm going to go conspiracy on conspiracy. I think the ACC and Jim Phillips knew that because Miami was creeping up next to Notre Dame, they didn't care about that ACC championship. I think they knew Miami was in regardless, no matter if Virginia won, if Duke won, or whatever. I think that they were like, you know what? Because I brought this up earlier in the week, and we talked about this. If they just put Miami in and Miami wins that ACC game, there's a big chance Notre Dame and Miami make it, because
exactly
the ACC gets Madison, that at large.
Yeah, James Madison would not be if if it was just Virginia and Miami in that ACC championship game, they were both ranked. So they would have met the criteria of being one of the 5 highest ranked conference champs. So obviously, if Miami is in there and they win the ACC championship, they're getting the auto bid. And then Notre Dame is in for sure. James Madison is way on the outside looking in.
Yep,
Yes.
but it seems like they wanted Miami in no matter what, because if Virginia wins that game, then Virginia and Notre Dame go on, because obviously Miami would lose a game and fall back from Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So again, my bigger conspiracy is it felt like they did that because they knew that an ACC team would get in and no Notre Dame would get in at the end of the day. It guaranteed Notre Dame would not get in.
Look, I said this at the start of the week. It's college football is now pro wrestling. When you look at how the college football playoff committee maneuvered this whole thing, it's all kayfabe, which means that they're pulling the strings behind the scenes and then trying to make you think that it's all legit up front. It's all. This was obviously there was a plan. We thought that the Tuesday rankings last week, it was obviously bad for Notre Dame, but we thought foolishly that they were giving themselves some fallback for Alabama so that both Notre Dame and Alabama would get in, but they were setting it up the other way around. They were guaranteeing that Alabama was going to get in because Nick Saban got involved in this whole thing. And, the whole Miami conversation where all of a sudden magically, just because they were ranked side by side, which again is completely subjective and up to where the college football playoff committee wants to put them. They didn't have to put them side by side. They could have kept BYU in the middle there if they wanted to, but they didn't. They dropped BYU back. They kept Alabama the same. Now all of a sudden that head-to-head means something just because they're side to side, which is a ridiculous argument to begin with.
Well, that's the whole thing, though. I think that the conspiracy is that they were trying to protect several different fronts for themselves. They're trying to protect, like, okay, if we say Notre Dame over Miami, and then, okay, what do head-to-heads matter? They said if we drop Alabama, then, okay, does a conference championship matter? So I think they were trying to protect themselves from all these angles, but all they did was make themselves look stupid in every single decision that they made. They made like 4 or 5 stupid decisions that make no sense, and that's why Notre Dame was left out.
Yes. I can't argue with that. Andre says, do you believe Virginia just threw the game for Miami? No, there's no way Virginia players and coaches
they just weren't that good.
Game. They just weren't that good.
Yeah.
Which is really comes down to again, the fact that Miami lost 2 games to 4 lost teams in the conference, and they weren't good enough to get into their own conference championship game in a conference where a 5-win team ended up beating a quote-unquote ranked team in the conference championship game. To me, it says a lot about, where Miami actually is and how good they actually are.
And to go full circle, it shows how much Notre Dame matters still.
True.
And they don't need to be in that conference.
All right, we got to get a break. Jesse, you got to get going. Appreciate you being here. Enjoy
everyone.
Your evening. All right.
Special goodbye to Bobby.
More rapid fire coming up next. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. His breaks are shorter
Yeah,
tonight.
I noticed that. Does that mean you're not selling as much?
Hey, I'm not selling anything. I don't know
Okay.
what you're talking about.
Oh, okay. Pick up what you're putting down.
Rapid fire. We continue on this Friday along with Bobby Hensley. I'm Sean Stiers, Jesse Stiers. Scooting out of here. Where did it go? I got to find this super chat. So, a super chat on the YouTube side from 740 Ohio. We've got to get right back to work and prepare for next season. Is in quotes. He says, Jeremiah Love on missing this year's playoff. Would J Love coming back next season ease the pain of missing the college football playoff this year? I haven't seen that quote. I don't know that it would ease the pain, but it would make a lot of people excited if he were to actually come back next year. It would be great for Notre Dame. I'm not leaning in the direction that that's actually going to happen. But if he actually did say that, we've got to get right back to work. That's at least enticing since he hasn't made an official announcement so far. What do you think, Bobby?
I heard something too on one of the message boards that his dad said something cryptic that.
Well, his dad said something cryptic, but he also made a TikTok post the other day that made it look like he was done.
Right. Well, I think he is. I think the weave is Notre Dame as a Notre Dame guy. I don't think he means himself.
So a little more royal than like I'm definitely a part of this going, into next year.
Or maybe, yeah, he is fishing for NIL money. Maybe there's some way that who blames the guy? If you can get $10 million to come back to Notre Dame, but I doubt he will. I think it's just all hearsay to be like, okay, well, I think it shows that he loves Notre Dame. He's happy for his time here, but until he makes his decision, I guess he's still Notre Dame running back.
Right.
But I don't think it means anything going forward. I think that'll be, I think it'd be silly to come back actually.
But I do as well, especially, he's had injuries in each of the last 2 years. The more serious one was last year, but even with the bruised ribs at the end of this season, it's like, that's why if you're good enough to be a first round draft pick, which everyone thinks that he is, because a lot of people think that, he's the best player, period. He's not going to go number one in the draft because he's a running back, but he's going to be a first round draft pick. And that's a lot of money. So,
yeah. And like your dream isn't to be a college athlete. Your dream is to play in the NFL. So if you have that shot and you're going to be the top at your position pick, I don't know why you'd pass up on that. It wouldn't make sense. But I think he was talking about Notre Dame as a whole. I won't be mad if he goes to the pros.
Makes sense.
I just think he meant Notre Dame, not necessarily himself.
He is in, and he, of course, being Jeremiah Love, in New York City, along with quarterbacks Fernando Mendoza, Julian Sayin, and Diego Pavia for the Heisman Trophy ceremony, which begins at 7 o'clock tomorrow night. Who's winning it, Bobby? Who's going to win the Heisman Trophy?
I think it's got to go to Mendoza. I don't see a way that story, it's a story. You're giving an individual award in a team sport. So it's already kind of, to me, again, the Heisman used to mean a lot. I don't think it means as much anymore. Mendoza's going to win it because they went undefeated and he's the best player on the team. I don't know for a fact that he deserves it over Love. Because is it the best athlete in college football? That's definitely Jeremiah Love, but it'll be Mendoza because that'll make their story complete.
He finished the season with the biggest win, and people were crowning him as soon as they beat Indiana last year. I love how you're rolling your eyes over there. But I mean, unfortunately, that's what it comes down to. And we were talking about Love earlier in the week. I do feel like if Jeremiah Love had not been, like if the Stanford game wasn't turning into the route that it was, and Love was not injured as early as he was, and he had more opportunities to make a couple of highlight plays, which, I mean, basically I think it's like every 8 to 10 touches, he's going to, on average, he's going to hit like a big play. So I think if he gets a few more touches in that game, he would have hit one and left things on a high note. But instead, unfortunately, he never got that big highlight. He was very productive while he was in, scoring that touchdown. But that's just the way it was. And so Fernando Mendoza, good quarterback on a really good team. And a lot of people are saying Fernando Mendoza is going to be the number one quarterback taken in the draft next year, as of right now. So I think I'm not trying to take anything away from Fernando Mendoza's ability or what Indiana is as a team, but it's ultimately going to go to good quarterback on great team. And so I think Mendoza is going to win the whole thing. Personally, between the three quarterbacks, I would give it to Diego Pavia over either of the other two, because I think that Vanderbilt is where it is much more because of Diego Pavia than either Mendoza or Sayin for the teams that they are with. Not that Indiana is chock full of talent like Ohio State, but they obviously just beat Ohio State. But I think that Diego Pavia has more willed Vanderbilt to be where it is right now. But I think that Jeremiah Love is the best player in football. So I think that he is the most deserving, but I think that Mendoza is going to win it.
Well, it's like Casey said in the chat, the Heisman equals yawning. Is it just because we're Notre Dame people and we're like, well, kind of sucks. We know Love's probably the most explosive, best player in country, and it's a farce of an award, really? Like, does it matter? Does who wins the Heisman matter? It just adds it to your resume and Wikipedia. I don't think it really adds anything to your draft stock or your pro contract or whatever. Jeremiah Love had 16 touches a game. I think I saw and he still was putting up these explosive numbers. He's a game changer. He should be the most explosive player, the best player, the most electric player. That's a Heisman player to me. I guess you talk about Heisman moments, and beating Ohio State will be Mendoza's, but really a missed field goal. Mendoza wasn't even on the field for it. One of the big reasons that IU was able to hold on for the win. He made a good throw after that to get the first down to run out the clock, but I don't see that as a Heisman moment. I don't see him as a Heisman guy. He's a good quarterback, but yeah, Diego for Vanderbilt, does anybody think if he leaves, Vanderbilt's going to win 10 games next year? No. It's an MVP award. Who means more to their team or who means more to college football? I don't know how to break it down, but Jeremiah Love, in my mind, is who deserves it. But Mendoza is the best story, and the story as a quarterback will always win.
So are you picking? But you're still picking Mendoza to win it, though.
Yeah,
right?
I'm saying absolutely. Okay. That's the story. That's what the narrative's been. It was whoever wins that Big Ten championship game, that's going to matter the most. And I don't think that matters, but that's what's going to happen on Saturday, tomorrow night. We're going to see Mendoza walk away with it, and I don't even think it'll be close in the voting, unless there's a lot of people that put their votes in early, because the window to send in your vote
That's true.
Might have been before the Big Ten championship game. But
Trackside 25, which we basically should just refer to as troll number 2 on today's show.
You mean tennis girls other count?
That's right. Says Notre Dame just became the most hated program in a few days after exposing themselves again for who they really are. They were already the most hated team program. Like, I don't think they just became anything. We started off talking this hour about that's why there has been so much reaction to everything that happened in the aftermath of Sunday's college football playoff announcement, because of the fact that Notre Dame is already so hated, and people are like, oh, you lost all that goodwill you built last year, whatever. Like, you were looking for a reason to hate Notre Dame, and everyone piled on top of Notre Dame from Dan Walken on down. I do find it interesting that, that even like Ari Wasserman, has like zipped up about it, and he's, come to a little bit more balanced opinion, but it's basically just because Miami got in over Notre Dame. But yeah, they didn't just become the most hated program in the last few days. They've always been the most hated program.
No, thank you for listening, because we were already talking about that. I think the word is polarizing. They're the most hated. In a lot of ways, are the most loved. College football can't exist without Notre Dame. There's a whole 30 for 30 about it, and it's not wrong. There's a reason why it always is this way.
I am Tenzin. I am the son of Aang, says, and yet, Sean, you don't acknowledge that I inspired today's episode. I responded to a comment that I am Tenzin, I am the son of Aang made on the Irish Breakdown Champions Lounge. I believe it was yesterday, but if you go back, Tenzin, and you listen to Wednesday's show, Jesse and I said we were going to be talking about the ACC stuff on today's show. So that's why I responded to you and said, by the way, we're going to be talking about this. But we were at least thinking along the same. Great minds think alike, I guess you'd say.
What does that mean? Crappy minds think alike too? No, maybe Sean Stiers is the most
trying to say.
Maybe Sean's the most polarizing host on Irish Breakdown.
I don't know about all that. Let's take one more break. Army-Navy game coming up tomorrow. Some thoughts on that and whatever else we can get a couple thoughts on before we wrap up today's show with Bobby Hensley, Sean Stiers, Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com. All right. Winding down. Rapid Fire, Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com, along with Bobby Hensley. I'm Sean Stiers. We started off the show talking about Notre Dame and the ACC and some pros and cons. Brian in the YouTube chat says the biggest pro of the ACC, the only pro, is it's a home for other sports. The 5 games are an albatross. You didn't really get to talk about this, Bobby. What do you think about the Notre Dame and the ACC relationship going forward? Do you agree with what Brian is saying there?
I mean, I guess I think that the conferences, especially for Notre Dame, they're lucky to have the luxury to pick and choose. But all the other sports besides the money ones or the Olympic sports, they can choose what they want. Like John Hopkins is in the ACC for lacrosse, I believe, or whatever conference they're in.
Yeah.
They're not, obviously they're not even Division I for football. So I think the ACC needs Notre Dame for football more than Notre Dame needs them because they're not giving them any good matchups. The ACC keeps getting passed over on any of the football stuff, which is the money. I don't think that the ACC matters to Notre Dame as much as people think, as much as the national narrative is.
Ira Shytown says time to finally go back to the Big East, and I don't mind that, but again, when Notre Dame had its Olympic sports in the Big East, that was obviously before they joined the ACC. College football was different then, and they had annual games with Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue, USC, Navy. They also played Boston College and Pittsburgh almost every year. So you had around 8 teams that you knew Notre Dame was going to play every year. Well, now all those teams are in conferences that have 9 conference games. And it's going to be much more difficult to try to get 8, let alone a full 12 games that you're going to have at least those 8 that you're going to play every year. And is that do you want to go back to that? Do you want to see Michigan, Michigan State, and Purdue every year? I know some fans would, but I don't think that those schools are going to agree to that. For one, I don't think you're going to get all those schools to sign, 10 to 20 year contracts to play Notre Dame every year. That's the again, you might not like the teams that they're playing in the ACC, and Notre Dame doesn't like the teams that they're playing in the ACC, but you're getting 5 guaranteed games. And in today's world where everything is merging together, it's going to be increasingly more difficult to be able to guarantee that you're going to have consistent opponents year in and year out.
Well, sure. And those 5 games, it's not their fault that some of the teams aren't as good as they expect when you make these schedules out and you add in the opponents so much ahead of time.
Right.
It's nice to have those 5 games so you're not adding Division II or MAC schools to fill in the gaps, which just weakens your schedule and weakens your narrative. But the way that the ACC has been treated by the playoff committee minus Miami, by putting an undefeated Florida State not in the top 4, by, again, maybe it's just Florida State they don't like, but the undefeated Florida State, they made a 3 seed to go out and play Oregon in a Rose Bowl, Jameis Winston, after they won a championship and then get slaughtered by Oregon. I just think that the ACC isn't doing them any favors because they don't do themselves any favors. And Notre Dame, the game that they play against something like Pittsburgh, if Pittsburgh were to win or one of the ACC teams, that would mean so much to them. So that's what I'm saying. By the ACC has a lot more to gain than Notre Dame does.
I would agree with that. Bitten by the party animal says, can we get a lawyer as a guest next week? I need someone to hold my hand through this stuff.
I need an adult.
I think that's, that's unfortunately, like all this private equity and everything else. It's man, can we just talk about sports? That's what everything merges into different directions.
Right.
Now.
Yeah, I'm not trying to get into all that, but that's what the NIL, that's what it's politics and it's money. And that and it's all about the money.
All right. Army-Navy game tomorrow. My question, Bobby, is, with the expanded college football playoff format and selection process and everything else, Army and Navy have both within the last couple of seasons been legitimate contenders, but to potentially, get into the college football playoff. Do you think, there are plenty of people who have suggested that maybe this game needs to be moved up somewhere on the schedule instead of this weekend? Do you buy or sell that going forward?
I completely buy. And I'm asking you, I know you had a military background. I don't know. Is there a reason in tradition why it's the last game of the year like this?
Basically tradition, so that they have a standalone game and they get all the attention just because of, the rich tradition, Army, Navy, and everything else. There's nothing else.
A standalone game.
Yeah, it's a standalone game on the college football calendar where it is right now. But again, because now you've got a 12-team format, and you've also got a selection process that those teams could be involved in. And now the playoff committee itself and, everyone involved says we're completely fine with it. But I think it's basically because of the fact that they don't want to step on the toes of them. You've got the military tradition and the money it makes for the academies and all that stuff. That's part of it as well. They don't want to step on those toes. But the bottom line is, Navy 2 years in a row has contended for its conference championship going into the final weeks of the season. And they can also impact how other group of 5 teams are viewed, in terms of at large and stuff like that. And if they've only played 11 games instead of their 12th game, which this is their 12th game, there's more impact than just on those 2 schools now.
I think you just flip it, make them week 0. There's a couple games, but you can give them a standalone. Like maybe, you move it around to Friday or Sunday or something like that, and you just give them their own standalone there. And then, because what happens if they're both playoff eligible and they're both undefeated or something? And yeah, that game means a lot, but you already picked your playoff. So one of them beats the other, and it could have knocked out a potential playoff team. So I think it should be a data point, which could help them, both of them.
Exactly.
And then just move it to the beginning of the season or make them a week -0. So we're so into college football and ready for it. We're thirsty for it. So everybody's going to watch it, and then we can just have it then.
And I realize the NFL obviously swallows up, the
Saturdays.
Yeah. And Sundays and Mondays. But, even if if the challenge, I think the calendar is going to get changed to some extent going forward, because if they expand the playoff to another round, they've got to find time where they can play these games and not be playing to the end of January. And you've got coaches complaining, the whole Nick Saban and the coaching searches and all that kind of stuff. I'll be surprised if they don't move the start of the season up at least a couple of weeks. But it feels like you could find a place for it, say, like you had conference championships last weekend. If you freed up like that Friday night for Army Navy, even, so it's like a standalone going into the weekend. Like it feels like there's some place that you could put it, but again, like that's conference championship weekend. So what if those are,
right.
I feel like you've got to move it because there's going to be more impact on everybody else, not just on those 2 teams.
Make it week -0 to be the only football game in the whole planet, because they haven't started even the week 0 games, and it still matters. It's still standalone.
Yeah.
And just have it then.
I think they're going to push back quite a bit to playing it, like a week 0 type thing, though. Personally, I think that would be the problem. But I don't disagree. I just think that there's going to be, some pushback from them on potentially playing it then.
Yeah, like I say, make -0, and then is it a data point or not? It doesn't matter.
-0. Yeah.
Well, it'll be a standalone. It'll be by itself, and if that's what they want, it'll help with ratings. It'll still matter a lot. It won't get lost. And even week 0, there's only 3 or 4 games.
Correct. Bitten by Party Animal says, who pays their salaries? We do. The taxpayers do. So there you go. All right, Bobby, appreciate you as always. Always fun having you in here. Have a great weekend, everybody. A lot of good stuff from the live chat tonight. We will talk to you next week. Budweiser's Weekday Sports Beat with IrishBreakdown.com.